Hi, ladies and gents. I'm so excited to be participating in a competition that is bringing awareness and support to the National Breast Cancer Foundation. Winning the Fab Over 40 competition will allow me to further my podcast in reach, notoriety, and listenership by winning the cover of New Beauty magazine as well as a $40,000 prize that will be funneled into my passion project with Please Me Podcast with Eve. This podcast has brought me so much joy and personal healing, and I can't wait to share many more seasons with you. Thanks to all my listeners who have left reviews and supported the show. Please keep that love coming. I am so happy to say that I am now in the top 2.5% globally. And I also want to be the face of New Beauty and an advocate for breast cancer awareness, which is afflicting more and more women at a younger age than ever before. Please consider following the link in the show notes and vote for me to win. Thank you.
I went to work the first 2 nights with what I called a mullet pussy, where I was like trimmed in the front, but not in the back. And my first night, no one mentioned it. My second night, I arrived to work, and the girl who had trained me or mentored me the night before took me aside and told me, like, yeah, if you're going to shave in the...
Last week, Darlene Green was back for an encore that was truly life-changing, and I urge you to listen back to see how the incredible stem cell technology she talks about can change your health and your life. It has surely changed mine. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Please sit back and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me.
Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex and sexual health by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I am so excited to welcome back Annie Temple. Annie was on the show a couple seasons ago, and she is kicking off my season in season 4. And I am so excited to have you back on the show. She is a best-selling author of Annie Temple's Business Bible for Erotic Entrepreneurs. And she has a new book coming out, How Sex Work Shaped My Life. And so that with that being said, I want to bring you back onto the show and welcome you back, Annie. Welcome to Please Me.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I had so much fun the last time we talked. And since then, I've been following you on social media, and I am a huge fan. So it's such an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have girl crushes on each other, right? And we're fans of each other for sure, because I'm always commenting on all of your Instagram posts, and I love all of the sexy pictures you take. And not just that, but everything that you say. You're an incredible writer, and I really admire you and what you're doing for women and women in your community. And thank you for who you are.
Thank you very much. That is so touching. That really means a lot. Thank you.
You're
That's
very
the
welcome.
goal, right?
Absolutely. And I have been reading your book, and I love your book. It's hard to put down. And I have to say that because it's on a screen, it's hard for me to really read and read and read, because I could stay up all night reading it. It's a really excellent book. It's one of those you don't want to put down, but my eyes just start to get tired. So I'm going to
Yeah.
want a hard copy of that coming up soon. But
Yes, I'm the same way, and you're gonna get a hard copy. I'm
yay.
definitely going to send one to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And this book is so full of really incredible, your life story, really. And I want to talk just now because I want to know what brought you specifically to your sex work and your stripping job. And when I was reading the book, I was surprised to find out that it was actually because you had an abortion. And that
Mm.
sort of is what led you in that direction. Do you want to just jump into that?
Sure. So I was 22 years old, and I felt like 22-year-olds shouldn't have the right to claim I'm too young, I'm too naive. And so when I became pregnant, I was really deeply ashamed. But it was not just the fact that I was unexpectedly pregnant at the age of 22 and not even in a relationship at the time, but also that I didn't know who the father was. And that's such a huge thing as a woman who may have more than one sexual partner in the course of a 28-day cycle. And I've seen women be in the position of having to get paternity tests run and just how horribly they're treated, how they're looked down on, how they're condemned. And my heart goes out to them because I was just in such fear when I found out that I was pregnant and I didn't know who the father was, that I would have to go through that social humiliation. So, not just because of that, but also because of the relationship with the two gentlemen involved were both not conducive to raising a family or starting a family or me being involved with them. And one of them in particular was extremely abusive. And the thought of having him in my life for 18 plus years was very daunting. And so at that time, I decided to have an abortion. And it was just very deeply scarring experience for me. The intake doctor was very condescending, and I just felt horrible. I'm sure a lot of people who've been through abortions can understand what I'm talking about. So after that, I hadn't told anyone. It was a big secret. I was feeling very depressed and I just needed to get away. That was a lot of people do that. They pull what's called a geographical, where you just move and run away and get away from all of the pain that is behind you. So I moved away to the big city, and within a couple of months of being there, I became very desperately poor. I was struggling to make ends meet in a retail position. I got the job really quickly and easily, but it was part-time, it was minimum wage. I just didn't make enough to get by. I had enough to pay my rent every month and a tiny bit more. And so I didn't really have enough to eat, and I was actually sincerely stealing some of my food to get by. So it was just a terrible time in my life. But I'm the type of person that I don't settle. If things aren't good enough, I change them. I'm very impulsive that way, and I'm a risk taker, so in a way, like, that's served me, but it also sometimes it has not served me. But in this case, I feel like it was a great decision, and my decision was that I decided to try stripping. And I had a girlfriend who was a stripper, so she helped me to figure out, like, how to get in contact with agents so that I could start dancing. And I started dancing in my very first night as a stripper. I was doing what we called private dances or VIP shows, where you dance just for one customer. You walk around the club and you ask each customer, "Would you like a private show?" And if they would, then you take them over to the side of the club and then you do a show for just them. And at that time, the private show booths weren't even private. They were open for everyone in the bar to see, but the selling point was that they were up close and personal and that they got to talk to you and stuff. Whereas usually when you're on stage, you're just on stage, right? They can stare up at you. So that was my first night dancing, was doing VIP dancing. And I walked around and sold dances, and I made more money in 3 or 4 hours that night than I did in 2 weeks at my retail job. And I had fun, and it was empowering, and so literally the next day I quit my retail job and I started stripping full time, and I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I really worked, like, most nights of the week, so, yeah, and then once I built up my costumes and the different tools of the trade that I needed, then I went on stages and started working to getting paid for my stage shows. So it started out like the VIP dancer walking around the club, and then I transitioned to going mostly on stage, but because I did still have the hustling spirit, I would usually sell private dances between my shows. And yeah, I came into the industry at a very weird time when private shows were just being introduced to the area that I live in. And so a lot of the veteran dancers didn't like it, and there was a lot of clash because of that. And the agents loved that I did like doing them. And so it was easy for me to get on stage too, because they wanted me to sell private dances between my shows. And most of the stage dancers refused to do it back then. But within a few years, they started forcing everybody to do it. So it was messed up. But in my case, I really liked it. And the other thing that I loved about the area that I live in, when you're a stripper here, it's non-contact dancing. And so that was the right thing for me because I had a boundary that I didn't want to be touched by my clients. And so there are different areas of sex work that I hadn't even considered getting into and would never have at that time because there was contact involved and that was a boundary for me at the time.
Yes, and having read your book, or part of it, at least the beginning part where
Mhm.
what we're talking about right now, I really didn't know because I've been to a strip club or two in my day. And I
Mhm.
always find it to be a really fun place to go and hang out. And I actually never really knew that there was a difference between the strippers that strip on stage and the ones that actually do the private dances. And I just thought that everyone did everything. And when I read your book, I was interested to know that and to find out that's actually there's two separate skills involved in that, right? One of
Yes,
them
there
is, yeah.
are, for sure.
Mhm,
But
absolutely.
depending on your region, it's possible that they were all doing both. It is possible.
Right, but not necessarily, which I didn't know until I read your book. So I thought that was super interesting. And also, another thing that you mentioned in the book was that you felt less degraded or not degraded stripping and more degraded working as a hostess or a server at a restaurant where
Mhm.
people would treat you like crap. The customers treat the wait staff like dirt, and you are doing things that you don't want to be doing. That's no fun, filling ketchup containers. And that was like more degrading to you than
Mhm.
stripping ever was. And that makes complete sense to me because
Mm,
you're doing all of this hard work and you're getting minimum wage, you're working an entire hour and making peanuts. That
yes.
is a degrading feeling. Can you just talk on that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why I've kept going back into the industry and why I wrote a book called How Sex Work Shaped My Life, because I've been in and out of the adult entertainment industry since I was 23 years old and I'm 50 years old now. And a big part of it was because we call them square jobs are
Right.
a lot of them are degrading. And even the ones that are like a higher, like you get treated better or you get a higher status or class in society. Like I did marketing management, I did frontline support work, all kinds of positions that I got paid quite well in the square world. But I didn't get treated very well by the employers or by the people that I worked with, or even in one place, I was assaulted, and so my safety wasn't really prioritized. I felt safer in strip clubs, and I can even say as a waitress, because I have waitressed in regular clubs as well, that the regular bars, a guy grabs your ass or is rude to you, and you don't really have the right to tell them off in most places. And you have to put up with a lot more shit. Whereas in the strip clubs, you have the right and the power to tell the customers off or tell the other staff members off. And it's part of the culture that we can stand up for ourselves and express our emotions. And so going back and forth from like this industry where you can say anything, you can also stand up for yourself. You also have rights and boundaries that you are allowed to maintain. And then going into the square world where you're supposed to shut up and listen. It's not only like more degrading, but it's also a culture shock. And it's really a hard adjustment because it's not who you are anymore. You're a person who's so used to being able to just say what you believe and what you think without it jeopardizing your job or being a big deal. And for instance, when I was in college, I told a woman that she had nice boobs. She wore a low cut shirt to school one day, and I said, "Nice breasts or nice cleavage," something like that. And although she was fine with it because her and I had gone for drinks a few times and we were buddies. But another student that overheard and knew I was a stripper and had a kind of like a thing about it reported me, and I was warned for sexual harassment. And so that's another, like, example of the culture shock, because coming from the strip clubs where, like, I touched more fake boobs than any man I've ever met, and then going into the square world where I can't even give a compliment to another woman who, to me, in my regular life, that would be a colleague, that would be a compliment. It wouldn't be creepy, like coming from someone. And usually intention matters and how it's said matters, but I had the hard lesson of learning, no, that does not matter. You have to learn how to behave appropriately in the square world, and that's hard when you're coming from a lifetime of growing up in strip club change rooms and being able to just freely talk about bodily fluids and your vagina and sex and whatever else. And even with the customers in the clubs, because first of all, they're liquid confidence
Courage.
and courage. Yeah. And so they'll talk about things that they don't talk about at home or with anyone else, but they will talk about with a beautiful woman that they're paying to sit with them or paying for a dance or whatever. And so you find yourself often in the position of being like a therapist, a sex therapist, really. And that, I think, is just part of being in the adult entertainment industry. And I feel you obviously must understand, because your openness about sex, it helps people to open up to you.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah,
Mhm.
so it just naturally happens that you find yourself becoming like a sex therapist or an intimacy specialist, as I like to call myself now. And that came from many years of being in and out of the industry, just starting with stripping and moving into work where I actually was in contact with my clients.
Yes, and I think that a lot of women can relate with your square job positions where they may be working for someone and their boss is inappropriate sexually or a coworker or something like that. And a lot of times when these things get reported to human resources, the woman loses the job. And we really have to stand up for ourselves. And I love that in that world, in the stripper world, you actually have more safeguards because there's bouncers there that are paying attention. They know what the rules are. There are rules involved in keeping you safe. And
Mhm.
if you cross that line, you can get fired, for instance. And that was something that actually happened to you. And I wanted
Mhm.
to comment about that because in the story, you mentioned that one of the bouncers reached and grabbed your breast, and you were
Mhm.
very upset and you reported him, and he ended up getting fired. And then you
Yeah.
felt sad, or not sad, but you felt, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to get him fired. And I was
Mhm.
thinking to myself, he freaking abused you. He should have gotten fired. I was like so happy that they did that. Do you want to just
Mhm.
comment on that? Because times when I come from a history of abuse, by the time I was 11, five people
Mhm.
had abused me. And you really don't learn boundaries. You really don't learn how to take care of yourself, how to say no. And the fact that you had the ability in that moment and you took that moment to say, that wasn't right, and you reported him was really brave
Mhm.
of you. But then on the
Mhm.
other side of it, then you felt bad that he got fired. And I was like, I don't get that part. So I wanted to just like talk to you about that.
And I think you do touch on, like, something, especially, like, being sexually assaulted is, I think we often feel like we need to downplay it, or like, why am I getting so upset about this little thing? And when I was sexually assaulted in the private show booth, it was just a matter of a guy leaning forward and kissing my crotch when my back was turned. And that was, it seems like something so small, because he didn't hurt me, he didn't penetrate me, he didn't assault me or become violent towards me. He didn't restrain me, nothing. It was just like a little drunk guy loser kissed my crotch, but it was really devastating for me, and it impacted my work severely. And sometimes I think, why was it so bad? Because it wasn't really that bad, but it was a violation, and it
Exactly.
it fucked up my work. Like, it fucked up excuse my language, sorry.
Oh,
It
you're
messed
fine.
up.
You can say whenever whenever you want.
Well, okay. Because and that is what I realized when I got into in-person contact work, is that I had to really protect my safety, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do the work. If somebody assaults me, then it will become too difficult for me to do the work that I love, because I'll be scared about getting assaulted again. And that's what happened when that happened in the private show booth. In the case of the bouncer grabbing my tit, it was, how do I explain it? It's if you're walking through a nightclub and somebody reaches out and squeezes your butt and you can't see who it was, and you're like, "Fucker."
Infuriating. That's happened to
It's
me many
infuriating,
times.
right? But
You know,
then you probably forget about it 10 minutes later, or like, it's like, "Fucking loser," but then you're
but
like,
it's not though, because adds to
"It does."
another layer of abuse that women
Yeah.
face on a daily basis. And I'm talking about that's happened to me in many different clubs and bars over the years, in square clubs, not in strip clubs. These are regular
Mhm.
clubs. And
Yeah.
that is another layer of abuse that
Yeah,
women
you get
face
kicked out if
all
you
the
do that.
time. Yeah,
You
and
get kicked out, you can't rewind.
if you don't know who did it, because you're in a crowded room and you're walking through the bar and there's 20 people all around and you just feel it and you turn around and there's all these people around, you couldn't know who it was, and it's just another layer of abuse is what I'm
It
saying.
is. But it's, to me, the difference was that with the guy, the bouncer grabbing my tit, was that I didn't feel traumatized by it. You know what I mean? In my mind, compared to other things that I've been through, that was more of an irritation and an annoyance than like a triggering of any kind of trauma. So that's why I was, oh, I felt bad that he got fired, because I really just wanted him to be told, if you do this again, you'll be fired. But
But the
he
bottom
got
line
fired.
is, if he did it to you, he probably had done it to other people. So
Very
I
true.
was so happy that he got fired. And it made me feel like you are safer. Like you said, you felt safer in the strip clubs than
Mhm.
you do in other jobs, because you actually have the ability to speak your mind and tell somebody off or say, get your hands off of me, or whatever that may be.
Totally. And there's usually regular customers that will be there to defend you if you have any problems. And if the staff isn't available, it's a community, right? So it's definitely, but then there's other, I don't know how far you got into the book, but there was years later when I'm working as a massage girl in the strip club and I walk out the back door and I almost get shot. So there are dangers, obviously. I think in any kind of alcohol nightclub type of situation, if you work in that situation, there's a certain degree of danger and risk that you're taking working in that environment. And even to the degree of becoming addicted to alcohol or drugs, there's the risk of that. And that's I think, a huge issue with the whole strip club industry, because as a dancer, it's really hard to love your customers, to consistently love your customers, because there are so many drunk idiots that wreck it for everybody else. And they may be only 5% or less of the customers, but they are so rude, so ignorant, so vulgar, so like woman hating, that their energy is so toxic that it makes you like feel you're put your walls up and you start to look at all the men like, what is with these losers? And that's one thing I didn't like about stripping. And it was a constant, because I didn't want to feel that way about my customers. It was a constant effort for me to deconstruct that and say, it's only a few, it's only this guy. Don't, everyone else in the bar is fine tonight. And remind myself that not to let the bad apples spoil the whole bunch, kind of thing. And but in my own independent intimacy work, I don't have that problem. I have so much love for my clients, and it's actually enabled me to just walk around with a feeling of love for my fellow humans and compassion. I walk around and I just see people and I just wish that we had a society where I could walk up and put my arm around them and say, "How are you doing today?" Or just spread love, because I see so much pain in people walking around. And I feel like
That's
a
so
lot of the reason,
true.
yeah, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
really sensitive to that, because I was so sick for so many years with an invisible illness, which I still have the invisible illness, but my health has just improved dramatically from natural treatments. But for years, I was so in so much pain, so dizzy, so constantly felt like I could pass out any minute. Standing in a grocery store lineup, crossing a street, having to go so slow because of the arthritis in my body. Everything that I went through made me feel so much compassion for people that now I'm the kind of person that if I'm walking and I see someone struggling in their wheelchair, I'll just push it for them. And
Right,
I'll
right.
say, "Can I help
The
you?"
lend
And
a
they say,
hand. Right.
yeah, and they say, "No, it's okay," and I say, "No, please, can I please help you because I've been in a wheelchair and I know the feeling of the struggle, and I'd really like to help you." Usually then they will let me. And
Mhm.
obviously, I won't force my help on someone
Of
if they don't
course.
want it.
Of
But
course.
sometimes I see people say no, and I can see it in their eyes that they really wanna say yes, and they still say no when I press it, and I can't do anything. I can't force them to
Right.
allow me
You
to
have
have the
to,
help.
of course, respect everybody's boundaries,
Mhm.
but I love that story. Are you suffering from erectile dysfunction in silence? Are you embarrassed by premature ejaculation? Is it hard to get an erection that is long enough for penetration or that lasts long enough to satisfy your partner and yourself? Just know that you are not alone and that 20% of men suffer from erectile dysfunction in their 20s, and it goes up 10% per decade. So 50% of men in their 50s will have some form of erectile dysfunction. My name is Eve Hall, a licensed physical therapist who treats conditions such as erectile dysfunction and other sexual health conditions. I'm here to tell you that there is a solution to erectile dysfunction, and I offer the gold standard in my practice called Inspire Health Physical Therapy and Wellness. I have a full protocol to get your sexy back, so know that I am here to help. Just know that there is no shame in having any sexual health condition, including erectile dysfunction. If that is you, be sure to reach me on sdc.com and leave me a message there, or reach me on pleaseme.online to listen to my podcasts or to leave me a message and book an appointment today. I want to just switch a little bit to your poetry because there's poetry sprinkled throughout the book, and I didn't know that you were also a poet. And I think that the mullet pussy poem is so freaking hilarious and genius. And I just want to just go into that because she has this amazing poem, one of the first in the beginning of the book. I think it is
Mhm.
the first poem at the beginning of the
Yeah,
book. And she talks about how when she first starts stripping, she didn't realize that she had to actually get rid of like all of the hair from the front all the way to the back. And so you left yourself a mullet. And I
yes,
think that is just the most hilarious thing. Do you want to just jump into like talking
sure.
about your poetry in that particular poem?
I mean, now at this age, I can't believe that I had never looked at my vagina in a mirror before I became a stripper. Like, that's just crazy, but so I shaved my bikini, which is what I always did when I went to the beach or whatever. I just left, like, some hair in the front and all the rest underneath because your bikini underwear hide it. But I didn't even know that I had hair on my ass. Can I just say
Yes.
so I went to work the first 2 nights with what I called a mullet pussy, where I was, like, trimmed in the front, but not in the back, and my first night, no one mentioned it. My second night, I arrived to work, and the girl who had trained me or mentored me the night before took me aside and told me, like, "Yeah, if you're gonna shave in the" like, back then too, they wouldn't have probably been okay with me having a full bush. I'm not sure if they do that now in the strip clubs, but back then you could have a landing strip, but you had to be very, like, s trimmed and
Hoist.
nice and you had to shave it like, in the back and the underneath, it was all shaved for everybody. And I just didn't even know that there was hair down there. That's how naive I was. But this girl took me aside and she was super sweet about it. And I still went and worked that whole night. Still, that's how naive I was that I didn't even get insecure about it and worked for that whole night again with the same mullet pussy.
You didn't have a razor that night, but you know what? It was the second day. You didn't get very far with that mullet pussy because
No, I didn't.
because
And then
people noticed and they were like, wait a minute now, you have to finish the job.
totally. Years later, I wrote that poem and it was published in a sex worker zine, and I became infamous. And I would be walking around town in Vancouver and I'd hear someone yell, "Mullet pussy!" Everyone-
That's hilarious. I just love that story so much. It's so funny. And everybody, that goes through shaving down there, and most women do because we go to the beach and whatever, can totally relate to that. It's like, where do we stop? Do we continue to the back? Do we just do the front? What do we want to do? How do we want that to look? But obviously, if you are in the line of work that you do, you would want everything to be trimmed and neat. So I just thought that was
Mhm.
just such a funny story. I wanted to talk to you too about your experience with academia because you eventually went back to school, not once, but more than once, right? And I didn't get to
Mhm.
the end of the book, so I have to finish reading it. But you talked about the theories, the feminist theories, and how you had a lot of shame initially around what you were doing for a living, and when you started studying, you realized that all of these things that were like causing you shame were just theories. Do you want to just jump into that?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because we grow up with propaganda. I want to say propaganda, and our society is impacted by different schools of thought. And when I was growing up, a school of thought that was very prominent was a feminist school of thought. It was, I think, second wave feminism, and it's very anti sex, anti pornography, and very judgmental towards people who work in the adult entertainment industry. And so that was the kind of background that I came to dancing with, as this belief that sex industry workers are perpetuating rape culture and that all of our clients are dirty, disgusting, perverted people that we should look down on and condemn and shame. And I started dancing because financially I was desperate. And then what I learned is I expected to feel exploited and degraded all the time, and it didn't happen. I didn't feel exploited and degraded all the time. So that was weird. But I still felt guilty because I'm perpetuating rape culture, and I still didn't like my customers because they're a bunch of dirty perverts. So this was my social conditioning. This was what I had been conditioned to believe, especially in university, because I took women's studies classes and I was very interested in women's equality and all that stuff. And I learned so much amazing, incredible stuff in women's studies. But I also got a lot of, I like to call it propaganda, because it's really just made up shit that people make up to try and impact other people's opinions and views about something. And this made up shit was to try and convince everybody that the sex industry should be abolished because it's harmful to women and it's perpetuated by abusive men. And so my experience just didn't match what I'd learned. But so there was this conflict in me. And I went back to university to try and win my mother's love back. And I was in women's studies again now as a stripper. This is after being in women's studies years before and getting all of the training. And now I'm in a class, and all of these women I'm sitting with are all very anti-sex work, anti-stripper, anti-everything to do with the sex industry. And I'm just the silent stripper not saying anything because I'm like, oh my God, I hadn't found my voice yet. And I didn't know how to defend myself. But I still wanted to write because I'm a headstrong person. And I have a lot of opinions, and I want to express them, and I'm a writer. So I wanted to write my papers about the empowerment that I was experiencing in the sex industry from a feminist perspective. But I just couldn't find any literature to support it, which was something that they required. So I was so fucking fortunate that I had a teacher's assistant who, rather than look down on me or try to convince me of my degradation, actually led me to a book called Whores and Other Feminists. And that book was it deconstructed all of these theories about the sex industry and how degrading it is, and theories about men's perversion and exploitative natural ability to exploit, basically, because I feel like feminism largely, at least that form, that school of feminism, largely pushes us to look down on men and want to shame them for parts of them that are quite natural, such as their ability to become physically aroused visually aroused by what they see a beautiful woman. And that's built into our biology. So why should we shame men for that? But I had been trained and I believe that we should. And so when I read Whores and Other Feminists, the biggest thing that I came away with from that was one, that I could form my own opinions and theories about sex work and be just as valid as anyone else, and actually more valid because I have the credibility that I've been a sex worker. Unlike most of the women who were speaking on behalf of sex workers and saying that we were too degraded to speak for ourselves. So that was one profound thing. But the other really profound thing that I think changed me even more than that, and that was huge. But the other thing was that realized that I could appreciate my customers and that I could love my clients. And that's why when I say in the strip clubs, it was a struggle for me because I really wanted to love my clients. The odd total asshole would just wreck it for everybody. But because of that transformation in me, I wanted to view my clients in a loving and caring and appreciative way because after all, they're paying my bills. And so this was just a huge paradigm shift for me. And it changed the way that I raised my son, how I looked at men for the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, so the whole thing about internalized oppression, because that's what that is. What I realized was that it wasn't the men oppressing me in the strip clubs or the owners of the strip clubs or the agents or anything. Although exploitation goes on in any occupation, they weren't oppressing me. The people who were really oppressing me were the ones who were telling me I should be ashamed and telling me that I was too degraded to speak for myself and telling me that my customers were pieces of shit. Those were the people who were oppressing me because they were the ones who were creating those horrible feelings of shame inside me and causing me to not have genuine compassion for my customers. And so then and that's a thing they teach in feminism. It's called internalized oppression. And it's when someone else's view of you, you internalize it. And
Yes.
so then and so I had internalized that oppression. And that's something that I broke free from when I read Whores and Other Feminists. And it became a desire, like a goal for me to release other people in my industry from that self-imposed prison of internalized oppression and teach them that they too can enjoy their jobs and be proud of the work they do and love their clients and appreciate them, and they don't have to internalize all of the things that we've been taught. And I feel like that's a huge problem in our industry, that there's this disconnect between our actual experience and what we've been taught to believe and think. And so it causes conflict within us.
And I think that really all women have this internalized oppression, right? Because,
Mhm.
and I had another guest on, and she was also an author, and she talked about her book and how her book was a dystopian book, and she went to another planet. And on that planet, they wouldn't let the humans on until they did a full examination. And the number one disease that humans had was that God was a man. And when you start at the top and teach girls that God is a man, that it's a masculine energy, we are all taught to believe that we are less than from the very beginning. And I
No
feel like
doubt.
we all have this internalized oppression from society that we all need to look at and really
Mhm.
throw that shit out, right?
Mhm.
Because it affects us in all different ways where we're always trying to make sure that we're not hurting anybody's feelings or speaking out of line or saying something that maybe we should say in a nicer way. No,
Mhm.
why is it that we can't speak our mind? I think that is so key and important that you learned along the way, and that I feel like all women can really benefit from hearing about
Mhm.
your experience, because It relates to all of us, whether we're in square jobs or not. It really does. It really affects us all.
And
So
as a mother, I can attest to that as well because, like, my son found his voice so much easier than my girls have. And that's with me as a mother, you know?
right,
So
exactly,
that
and
it
being an
just shows how
example.
strong society affects us, and yeah, all of those little things that are systemically involved in building us as humans that we are taught to believe.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. So we are already at 40 minutes. And so I am going to jump into the next section here because I want us to do a little role play if you're open to that.
Yes.
Okay. So we talked about doing a role play where I'm going to be your client and it's my first time. And I'm coming to see you for, let's say, a sensual massage. Okay.
That would be probably what you're coming to me for because that's what I do.
Perfect.
One of
Exactly.
the things.
Yes, exactly. So I am going to be coming to see you. So here I am and action. Hi, I'm Eve. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you. Can I give you a hug?
Oh, sure. I love hugs. Thank
Oh,
you.
oh, I love this hug. It's very nice
Thank
to
you.
see you.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much. What should I do?
We'll get the donation out of the way, and then if you haven't showered already, I'll get you to have a quick shower, but if you showered right before coming, then please wash your hands and then take off all your clothes and lie face down on the bed.
Okay, that sounds good. I have a little request. I'm just wondering if we can talk about that.
Absolutely. I am all for communication. It's so important.
Perfect. So I'm a little bit shy to tell you about this, but I really love my toes sucked. Would that be something
Mm.
that you would do?
Unfortunately, no, I don't suck toes, but I could maybe potentially over time, if I get to know you, we could plan a special session where we start with some feet washing. And then I would potentially consider that. But at this time today, because we have decided on a massage, I would prefer if we just stick with what we originally planned. And then I can consider it further in the future.
Okay, I have a foot fetish and I would really love for you to pay special attention to my feet today.
Okay, sure. I will try to massage them. I don't usually focus on feet that much, but as long as your feet are nice and clean, it should be fine. I will give you a full body massage and I will pay some extra attention to your feet as well.
Perfect. And unseen. So that was really fun and a really great example of how to communicate in situations like this. I'm bringing to you something that is not something that you would really necessarily be interested in, and you
Mhm.
creating a boundary around what you are willing to do and not willing to do.
Hmm.
And that goes with all sexual experiences. You may have a partner that comes to you with something that they really want to try and you're really not that into it. But the idea that you can consider it, you can think about it, and maybe
Mm.
next time you can do something different is a beginning of a conversation. And it's opening up the door for more conversations to be had in the future.
And I've been in that position many times where I gave a very similar answer to what I gave to you. And in some situations, I did go on to perform whatever that service was and with boundaries and with understanding and communication. And in other situations, I considered it and I decided, actually, no, I don't think I want to do this. And then I communicated that very respectfully. And as long as respectful communication is happening, then there's a lot better chance that people will be willing to try a little more than they might usually try as well, I feel like.
Yes, absolutely. Communication is key for all relationships and all situations, whether you're speaking to someone in getting a massage or otherwise. Practice makes perfect. And I love that you are willing to do that role play with me. So I want to
That
make
was
sure,
fun.
yeah, it was. I want to make sure that my listeners can find you. Where can we find you?
You can find me at annietemple.com. And please, I encourage you to sign up for my newsletter so that you can read my blog posts, which Eve was saying that she really appreciates the kinds of things that I write about. So you might actually really be interested. I talk about all kinds of things to do with intimacy and life and just being a good person. And I've even been writing about health lately, which seems to be popular with my readers. So sign up to my newsletter, please.
Absolutely. And she's an incredible writer, and her Instagram and Facebook pages are a lot of fun. So follow her there as well. And if you love this episode as much as I did in recording it, please get out your phones right now and share it with somebody. Copy it and send it to somebody that you think would also really relate to this episode in particular. And I also want to welcome you to visit my website, pleaseme.online. And on there, I have all of my podcasts. I also have all of my shameless interviews where I've been on multiple other podcasts, and all of my webinars are also on there. And I also have a beautifully curated store of sex toys, lubes, books, and more. And so I would absolutely love you to check that out. And I'm so happy to have had you on the show tonight or today, Annie. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time.